Okay, so I'm Ruth McHugh, a Galwegian, an original Galwegian. Studied fine art in RTC, then went to Dún Laoghaire, then finished my undergraduate as a degree in NCAD. Um, yeah, so I'm an artist, cultural professional, worked in galleries and some academics writing as well. I would always call myself an artist before photographer. Um, I use photography a lot. It kind of happened at a certain point. I was doing an exhibition in the art center. That was much later. For that series, I certainly would be considered a photographer, and I had done a course in videography at the Digital Hub in Dublin, and I wanted to keep up practice. Having gotten used to producing videos, I wanted to work independently with video, and I got a job with Ballymun Communications as a videographer. And as soon as I arrived in Ballymun, I realized I thought that the whole of the Ballymun flats were gone at the time. There had been a project about, there had been a curated project about Ballymun, and I thought it was all gone. And when I got there, I realized that there was still one block and one tower left. So I started just, I don't know whether there really was access. I started walking around it a lot, just kind of doing this mapping the terrain consistently. I would do it, I would work Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. I might go Tuesday. It depended. If I saw something, um, my boss allowed me to bring out somebody with me with a tripod and maybe sound, boom, hold a boom. So I had kind of an assistant sometimes if I thought there was something I really wanted to film. And I took photographs at the time just with a little Lumix camera, and then I bought a Canon. I decided to do a shoot. I had this notion about the 1960s and the close of the 60s. And if you look the 60s up, like it's become this kind of cliche, of the style, everybody like Carnaby Street. I certainly went through a time when I had a notion that if you went to London, it would be all these like Mick Jagger, the Beatles walking down Carnaby Street. I was so disappointed when I ever saw Carnaby Street. And I kind of wanted to put that mock notion of the 1960s, mid-century fashions, modernism, together with the flats, which were mid-century, uh, came out of maybe Le Corbusier's idea for the ideal city. Um, and the kind of a brutalism that has had a very bad name from housing projects all over Europe. They were all being demolished. I think at the time there were very many projects being demolished. But I found when I actually did the project that Ballymun was only supposed to be a short-lived solution. When I talked to some engineers, they said, it wasn't supposed to last. And it was a prefabricated building. So there was a colleague who was tiny and she was from Ballymun and she had a really great energy. And I just said, Crystal, would you like to work on this project with me? And she kind of became my primary model, who nearly was very much a Twiggy type. And she was tiny. So I found these clothes like a Mondrian type dress that looked like the Yves Saint Laurent Mondrian dress, but it wouldn't have fit anybody. But I just was very lucky. It wouldn't have fit anybody but Crystal. I found a few things that completely read into the architecture um, that she could wear. And, it was very easy because we worked very easily together. And if the weather was good or it seemed like there was a reason to go out, we would go out and maybe and we did plan a shoot And the thing with the planned shoots where there were things like suddenly there was no access. Suddenly they locked the access to the place. So we had to kind of mock the fact we were allowed in the door so you could see the building. We did a recce and took some shots and some footage at the recce, which we ended up where the footage I had to use for the actual video because I hadn't been that near the building since, you know. So there were all the usual obstacles to making something. Nothing came quite as easily, but a lot of it was easy, and I liked it being easy. And it was long term. It took time because I was waiting for them to demolish the tower, and that took much longer. They took much longer to get it around to that, and I couldn't finish the project till then. And that kind of ended up quite nice because the towers were named after the heroes of 1916. They kind of the first people moved in 67, but they were they were being named around the time of a celebration, maybe 50 years, was it? 66? Yeah, it was 50 years in 66. So the towers were, so that was kind of nice that I showed the show. I think 67, but it did still tie in with um ce- mm, celebrations of 66 that were going, or 1916 that were going on. Um, and it was quite an ironic piece. I worked with the people and interviewed people. I interviewed older women, groups. There were community groups, and they were kind of BRYR. There were various little community projects that were very near where the last tower was standing, and they were kind of watching it being demolished as they came in, and they would do various community things together. And I got to interview those women, and some of the young people helped as well. I got some people from the RYR, which is a youth project in Ballymun, and they participated in one of the shoots. Um, it was long term, and then I did a lot of research, and then I mean, when I went to college, like I would have worked with Brian Maguire and people like that in painting, and they would have talked about knowing your subject and then wearing it very lightly, you know, getting knowledge and then trying to, you know, it being there. And if people really know, they will know that you have done the research, but it's also incredibly accessible to everybody, you know. So I had people from Ballymun reading, say, Le Corbusier's uh, piece on the modular, take a man with arm upraised, and it's all about the measurements that buildings are made to the measurement of man, and buildings are machines for living in. And they sound ridiculous when people, when someone who lives in them says them. It was um and then there's some of the people I interviewed said, like, I didn't know Crystal, who I was working with, and wore the Mondrian dress. When we went out to shoot the film, I didn't know that she lived in the building behind where we were filming. So this was really, it was lovely synchronicity, and she was very quiet about it. But when I interviewed her and her sister, they spoke about it being the only home they ever knew. So it was about place, and it was kind of a lament for the place. And her sister talked about keeping the keys, so the corporation for asked people to return their keys, and they kept their keys, and these were very poignant little things in the piece. And I followed the demolition. I went many days, and one day um, there was just one tree left beside the building that was disappearing, and a whole pile of birds were on it, and they lifted off it, and it was a lovely metaphor for the people leaving. the flats, so that became something that we used as an entrance. And then I had all this footage and I had been working on it. And some of the photographs that I took on the shoots were selected for the RHA twice, 2 years in a row. And I think Paul Fahey was aware and we had a chat. And he supported me to finish the film. And he also suggested maybe I wanted someone, well, I needed sound. And I had spoken to Justin McCarthy years ago about him producing some kind of way of making the kind of sounds you want that are nearly what you hear, but kind of like sound like what you want, but wouldn't cost you money because they're composed. So I had kind of a wish list of things. I liked the idea of The End by the Doors and For What It's Worth by very much a protest song by Neil Young. There were a few things I loved. I loved oh, there's a Stones song as well that I loved, or was it Pink Floyd? Um, there were a few, and there was all this Penny Lane, all of these songs. It was a fantastic idea of a soundtrack. But Paul, I approached Justin, who also has a history of editing. So he edited the film and he made a soundtrack that sounded like the 60s, and sounded like the end, but wasn't really the end. Like some people who know their stuff kind of went, wasn't it? And it kind of stretched for what it's worth. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like I crossed paths with a lot of people who ended up, I moved back to Dublin. I came back to Dublin for Art Space, or for Galway. We met for Art Space in, I'd say 1986. Someone put up a poster in Nocton's pub. Just, does anybody want to get to, I don't remember the wording. Maria will remember it because Maria was very close to Tom Conroy and Tom Conroy was, you should interview Tom Conroy because he was really the initiator and he's now an art director in film. But and he would have been part of Mockness, I think. He would have been involved in Mockness. He would have been on the board of the Arts Festival. Early on, he would have known Ollie Jennings, Porrick Brannock. Tom would be one of those. And he put up this notice in Noctons. And we were myself, Maria Van Kampen, Kathleen Fury, I knew because Kathleen, we were slightly aware of one another because we went to school together. Sharon O'Malley, also I went to school with. So strangely enough, there were at least three people from Taylor's Hill. Catherine Ilanahan, French artist who knew around Galway. Maria, I had seen an exhibition she had done, I think, in the Art Centre. I think she was very interested in music, and her first exhibition was kind of about music in Ireland, musicians in Ireland. Um, I don't know if David came to the first meeting. So we were a small group and we started looking seriously. I think maybe Tom and Catherine, certainly Tom and Maria were very dynamic in uh, pushing it forward, finding people to talk to. I think Catherine and of course Tom would have had some connections. I think they'll be better. Do you know, I think Kathleen Fury might have worked for Mr. Powell in the shop in Four Corners.
Where shop?
Yeah, no, the art shop.
The art shop. Oh, yeah.
She knew him anyway. I think she knew him. I have a feeling it was Kathleen who had a connection there with the art shop because our first building belonged to Mr. Powell. So we met, we had this thing going, and we seemed to bond in that I was also, I knew a lot of people. I knew people from the Great Fine Arts Centre in Dublin. I knew a lot of people. I knew the artists who had been my tutors, had the independent artists. I knew people who were involved in setting up Temple Bar. at that time, so I had seen people being dynamic and doing things and thought like, we had that kind of drive. This is not what we're going to start something and we're going to, because Galway should have studios. It would have been a bit scary. It would have been like, we'd have been afraid of Brian Burke. Um, they would have been the artists. Would have been, there was a funny gallery that ended, I think it was Jesus, a man called Jesus who ended up he had a shop in Smithil, but he had a little gallery actually just near, actually, do you know there's a couple of houses at the bottom from, if you come down from the station and you turn left? Along towards Foster Street. I think it is Foster Street there, isn't it? There are a couple of quite nice houses there on your right. There's a couple of coffee shops, and then there's a couple of houses that are a little bit back in, fine houses. And the first one of those with the lovely arch, he had a gallery there, and I would have remembered Porrick Greeny. I grew up with Kenny's. Kenny's, of course, was the art gallery in Galway, and they had an art gallery in Salt Hill, Kenny's down the slope. Do you know that building? So I would have gone to openings there as a child a lot. So I would have been aware of, yeah, art in Galway, but I would have been terrified. And tended to be men or foreign, they tended to be, to be exotic and be an artist who came to Galway with an exotic name tended to. Yeah, I mean, I would have met Sharon O'Malley in college, in school, and we would have been, and Mary Waters as well, who is a very fine artist. We would have been artists. I went off after the first meeting, and I worked in the Crawford Gallery in Cork for a year. So I became an administrator of a big open submission exhibition, which I encourage people who were in this new group, Art Space, I think we already had the name even without a building yet. And they submitted to that exhibition. And we got together. There was a women's festival. I think we might have gotten involved in that year in a women's festival before we even had studios, like which set up this dynamic. We were involved, and even when I came back, when I was in college, I came back and we got involved in festivals in Rahoon doing children's workshops, So we were building some kind of dynamic. We knew the people who were, they were setting up went on to set up the film center, all those people kind of knew one another, and we're seeing people, yeah, Owen Foyle, the Motion Club, all kinds of things. It was very exciting. Key Street was alive. I mean, before I went to college, I set up a shop opposite the Keys, secondhand clothes shop. It was a place called Traders Way, which they did an article in the paper and called it the new Carnaby Street of Galway. And there was a pet shop in the back, and we sold secondhand clothes. And I started really making environments, which made me, like, I only did it for a few months and then went to art college. From that, I knew I wanted to make art. I was very cheeky. I strolled up and said I wanted to do art. And a few people had dropped out, and I was lucky, and I just got in. And he knew of me. Someone had, a previous student had spoken, because I loved art. I mean, I lived for art. Like if I always did, I'd be drawing or painting or, I actually didn't think I could be an artist. I wanted to do textiles or fashion, but I loved drawing. I really, really loved drawing. And I wanted to paint, but was a bit afraid of oil paints and things like that. But I was always drawing. I particularly loved drawing. And, we'd be in the Texaco. You'd get an honorary mention in the Texaco and things like that. My parents sent me to art classes on a Saturday in Snipe Avenue it was at the time it's a special needs school in Snipe Avenue, which my mother was involved in. Um, kind of I think they drove people to and from, the various people. Um, this is all old Galway, isn't it? Um, So I mean, I wanted to do art, and I think yeah, I did. I knew I wanted to do art. I actually applied to Dublin, but I applied wrong without my foundation. So I went up for an interview to do fashion actually in Dublin, and they asked me to send them some more drawings, and I might have finished within 3 years and skipped foundation, but I never sent them the extra drawings. Um, at this stage, I'd spent a few years, and I'd lived in London and got really into, recycling and the markets and that. So, like opening the shop in Key Street. And it was so funny at the time, when I went to the college in RTC, these days people would be, you're setting up all these things, like and doing food with friends. All that stuff you'd be doing as art now. When I went up to the RTC, they said, I heard you opened a shop. I hope you won't be doing anything like that here. They were very, very different times. So all that kind of drive and dynamism. Yeah, I think leaving college and coming back and trying to set up studios was another use of that kind of energy, to just, let's not wait around. Let's do it. Let's have something. Our first space was belonging to Mr. Powell, and I'm sure Kathleen Fury knew Mr. Powell in some way. And we were looking for a space. I'm not quite sure if I think we were involved in that women's festival, and I'm not sure if it was before we actually got the studios. But we got this building. I was in Cork for a year doing what was a big open submission exhibition called SAID. So I went down to work in Crawford Gallery, and after about 4 months, I was kind of promoted to being the administrator of this open submission exhibition, which was a baptism of fire. But it was like there were really interesting people in it at the time. And so I was meeting a lot of people, and I was meeting people from the Arts Council and getting to know, like I worked with Peter Murray, and I got to know the people in the Triskel Arts Centre, um, and Theo Dorgan, who went on to be Poetry Ireland. So they were very dynamic people, and they were connections because I I would have known the people on the Arts Council from doing the corporate. So yeah, I mean, art space. I didn't do a lot of administration, but they were aware of us, um, and it was a decision. Like, I mean, I was offered to, go back and do arts admin, and there's surely be a job waiting for you. And I chose to come back to Galway. It was a big choice. It was like, I'm going to give my art a chance. It was like a fork in the road. It was one of those, are you going to go all the way down the road to it in administration, or are you going to do your work? I was painting. I was painting, and like, I mean, we didn't have studios for about a year and a half. Like, um, people were setting up dark rooms in places they had. I think Sharon O'Malley's father had that old mold building. So Sharon had a studio up above the King's Head in the back there. So at some stage I might have had some access to painting there, which was like, I mean, I think at the time I was maybe a little bit like over influenced by Sharon because we were in the same space. It wasn't a good idea. Um, and I liked that to be more separate when we were in studio spaces, not open space with somebody else. I always liked that, like to, have my own room or whatever as a studio. So we got the building in Foster Street. It was quite funny at the time because, like, a few months in, the only television program in Ireland was Cursi Alina, and it was in Irish. So somebody had to speak Irish. We had an administrator. We got a CE scheme to run Foster Street, which was fantastic. And like, as I said, we were all in different ways maybe Tom Conroy knew the arts. Um, was it, we had a lot of people who knew what we were doing and were on our side in the Arts Council, like Kieran Corcoran. They were aware we were, through Tom Conroy, they would have been aware we were like setting up some kind of arts. So there was, and Michael D. Michael D was, we had, just so much support for doing something in the West because of Michael D as well. And Michael D was a huge supporter. So it was like a really great time to be trying to do something in Galway. There was a lot of support around us to do it. And the only pity is that at a certain point, and I suppose they did get there in the end, they would come and visit us and try to figure out some way that we could own a space for our space, that in some way we could actually, instead of them helping us to pay rent, we could find some way that we might be buying a space that would be permanent studios for the arts in Galway. But it was definitely, support, and we tried really hard to we toured a lot. We started touring exhibitions. We had all kinds of exhibitions in Galway. And the touring exhibitions were like, really making catalogs, all producing work. So yeah, it was, and we brought people in. The funny thing was that people could be in art space if they were on the dole. So, it was a little, there were some little loopholes maybe that they tried to be amenable to people getting on because it was hard to find people who totally fit the criteria to be on the dole and in art space. And through that, we got Pete Keneally, who was Catherine's partner, came in and became our framer. And he now has a permanent framing studio in Upterard. So we had a framer on site, which was kind of really lovely. So we had an administrator, um, and then we had various positions. At some stage, I was the exhibitions officer. I would maybe travel with touring exhibitions. Yeah, Foster Street was freezing. Yeah. Foster Street, we all came in, we worked and we worked and we worked and we painted it. It was a big, absolutely, there was uninsulated stone building and it was freezing. It was so cold, our heads were frozen off us. Coursey came, they discovered that Mr. Pole had another layer upstairs. I didn't even know this. Like, Coursey Alina comes out and everybody's laughing because they go upstairs and above us, on the whole floor of above us in this, it's a warehouse. It's a stone warehouse. And there's something on the ground floor. I can't remember. It might have been some kind of hardware shop at some stage. We're on the next floor, which is stone facade and stone inside and no insulation. And above us again, there's a whole pile of onions drying out on the floor. How could you resist it if you were doing a documentary? And still somewhere, it's online somewhere, you can get the footage of that, like of people talking about art space and the footage of the onions on the floor upstairs.
Just the company
It's
bugger
nice
it.
to have been part of it. And then I got to a stage where I was getting annoyed with what happened in Galway, about the never properly support. Things were going up like the museum complex and people weren't listening to Druid, their needs. They were meant to be facilitated in that and they weren't facilitated. And I really, I really think at one stage, the studios we had in Dominic Street, we lost because the lease was sold back. And I really thought like that. At one stage, they did a Brian retrospective. It might have been for the Arts Festival, and they opened that building. They opened through to what was art space, from the arts center, and you had this huge building, like, because you know the restaurant next door, we were above the restaurant next door, and I think that it's all Lady Gregory's house complex. And you know, you've got Oris Nagel, and I really think like it could have been such a fabulous development to properly develop, knit it together, have the Irish, the art, all of it, you know, in a whole big complex and build out the back. It would have been fantastic, you know. There were so many possibilities and opportunities missed here, you know. Um, and we were living hand to mouth, and I had a, you know, had a show that meant that I had a little bit, I could move to Dublin, and I decided to move to Dublin. I really don't know what exactly instigated it, you know. Um, but I was a bit disillusioned with the fact that things weren't moving, and I think we might have been losing Dominic Street, and I loved Dominic Street. I really, you know, we had studios there we could paint up and open for the arts festival and show in them, you know, kind of. We were, without a lot of work, we were part of the arts festival. The studio group was part of the arts festival every year, you know, in a really accessible place, you know.
You know,
So I got a scheme in Dublin, and the first one I was on was involved with poetry, and then I moved to Art Squad. So I was kind of doing murals. And then I applied to the Fire Station Artist Studios, and they were amenable to supporting people who were moving. I think there was a bit of you know, their live-in studios. There were very few live-in studios in Ireland. There were, so you lived there, and I applied and I got a studio. I think I mean, I had built some reputation here, and I certainly, yeah, I had some good work. I was like a whole that I was building on at that time, and I was really busy. I did an awful lot of exhibitions. We then had L'Imaginaire Irlandaise, which Catherine negotiated by approaching. Catherine is from Lyon, and she approached a man who had a gallery called L'Embarcadère, which is which is near the water in Lyon, but it was a big exhibition space. So l'Imaginaire Irlandaise was happening, and they wanted it to not just be in Paris, throughout France. And we came with this ready-made, we have a site, we have this group who've, you know, toured, we have a reputation for, you know, we did some, yeah, we did some nice, I don't know if that was the first time we used Tony to do Tony did the catalogue, and I can't think of Tony's surname at the moment. He did a lovely catalogue. You can get it from somebody else. When you get the catalogues, you'll see Tony's surname in it. Um, but we had a reputation because Maria was very good at doing the design for exhibitions. You know, she did. We When I look back, you know, we did a lot of catalogues and for the exhibitions, and we were kind of up to speed on getting our stuff together for exhibitions. And
these
I absolutely loved Dublin Street. I loved my time there. Yeah, I loved my studio. You know, I really loved working. I worked very hard. I'd say at times, like I haven't painted like that since, where I felt like, you know, I knew this space so well that at times things painted themselves. You know, I felt like I had no part in how this came together, but I was doing so much work. You know, where you battle with paintings and you stay up all night, you, and then the next thing just kind of does itself, but it's not without having sweat and blood for it, you know? I can't imagine it's 40 years. I really can't. And this week I've been working on the Galway Arts Festival and going to gigs like The Stunning, which is like, I feel like I've lost 20 years, you know, meeting all these people from back then, and we all have gone disparate ways, you know. It was, you know, the Arts Festival was so fantastic at the time. and we had to live on it. We didn't have much money to be going anywhere on holidays. We thrived on, it coming to us in the summer, and we all participated. We were all involved in the parades, we all, and we got to know more and more people, and the music scene was great. So we all, and I did a lot of exhibitions, and I started going to Anna McCarrick before I would have an exhibition. There was also a gallery, Joe Gagan opened a gallery in the Bridge Mills, and he would have done some shows there as well. Um, and we did an exhibition together. There were a group of us who got involved in a protest exhibition called Fool's Gold. Um, that was in the early days, and they were supposed to be mining for gold in Crowpatrick. And we went along to a talk and we got involved, so we decided to put on an exhibition. Um, so it's quite a big exhibition, and myself and Gabby Frusi, who worked with the Galway Arts Festival, I had known Gabby from college. She studied textiles, German who came to Galway, but who was also a very big part of the Galway Arts Festival. She was part of the original group who set up the Galway Arts Festival. Um, we applied for funding to do that Fool's Gold. So we didn't. I still have the big negatives from the poster we did for that. I don't know if somebody probably. I don't have a poster, but it was a nice poster. We did. We were pretty busy. We were always doing something, always up to something. I mean, the idea of a black box out there was a really interesting idea. It was a really interesting contemporary architectural black box, you know, that housed studios and was like really up to date, proper architecture. Um, I'd like to see them. Oh, I'd like to see them thrive. I'd like to see more studios. I love that there are different studios with different kind of feels about them. And I'm really glad that it's great that we started it. And the thing is to hand it over and move on too, isn't it? You know, and give other people a foot up. I mean, I haven't left Dublin. I don't know why I went back, and then I started working in the RHA, and then I started writing, doing academic writing, kind of around the arts infrastructure, because I found that and even that, like I wrote about Leitrim, which would have come out of like that idea of artist led. I believe Megs Morley did her PhD on artist led, and she has an archive in Nival, the National Irish Visual Arts Library, where I worked for you as well, out of L'Imaginaire Irlandaise. At that time, we also showed in Lorient, which Galway is twinned. And then we we started we got to know artists in Lorient, and they suggested a three-way thing called Rencontre, Beganon, and oh, I forgot. It was a three-way. So these three, we did residencies with Art Space in Lorient, and then we did an exhibition in Lorient a year later. We went on a residency to Ludwigshafen in Germany, which was also twinned with Lorient and Galway, I think, or maybe just Lorient. It was a three-way. So we went there and we had an exhibition there, and they came to Galway and we had an exhibition in Galway of these three, and I ended up in about 1997. It was after I'd moved to Dublin, but I was still part of Art Space, and I was still exhibiting in these, like L'Imaginaire was after I moved back to Dublin, but I was still a member and a director of Art Space. So I was part of that tour to Lorient, and to Lyon. And then I was offered a residency in Lorient. So I did a residency in Lorient as well. You know, Sharon did wonderful work and built a wonderful reputation, and that was very sad. And Deirdre Breheny, who we lost in the very, she was a member, an early member, and she passed away in an accident in while we were still in Foster Street. So that was very, very tragic at the beginning, you know. So those members, their work was really beautiful. Um, yeah, okay. So, I mean, I'd like them to be honored and, you know, for their contribution, and they made a big contribution. And people make contributions in different ways. I always felt like even if I didn't do a lot of administration, I felt my commitment was to be committed, to go in and work and be in the studios and be working in the studios. I worked funny hours. I might work very late, but I tried to be consistent in working. Other people worked office hours, and I think they didn't appreciate my hours. But I definitely, we felt it made us feel like professional artists, and that people acknowledged our right to be artists and that it was worthwhile. And again, like when I went to the fire station studios, it was such an acknowledgement of your right to be an artist and to be treated well, you know, and have a place to work, you know. So, that's guys, we deserve better in Galway for the arts. Honestly, um, every year I work in the print works. Such a beautiful space that deserves, you know, to be, that's where the arts should be, at the heart of Galway. We don't need it anywhere on the periphery. It needs to be at the centre. It attracts so much and it's necessary for the city. You know, we have a challenging climate that, you know, people need things to uplift them at different times in the city and to address issues and, you know, um we deserve, I cannot believe that we have the City of Culture and we don't end up with a fabulous, and we also should have a municipal collection. I mean, it's time. It's really time to do something about it because, you know, it has to be done. We deserve it. I am sure that there are people who would donate work to the city, you know, to be part of a museum, you know, in their name, you know. Artists who have worked in the West, we should have a fabulous collection of art here associated with the West of Ireland and the people who worked in the West of Ireland, and a fantastic contemporary art facility, a fabulous gallery. We deserve a fabulous gallery, you know.